greater than I remember the dispatch call clear as day. Domestic disturbance at the Miller place out on Route 9. I'd been on the force long enough to know that domestic often meant trouble, and the Millers, well, they had a reputation. Old man Miller was a hard drinker, and his wife, well, let's just say she didn't take much from anyone. I pulled up to the farmhouse, dust kicking up behind my cruiser. The place looked like something out of a bad dream. Paint peeling, porch sagging, and the smell of whiskey thick in the air. As I stepped out, I could hear the shouting inside. Not just yelling, but the kind of rage that makes your skin prickle. I knocked on the door, announced myself, but the arguing didn't stop. Then the screaming started. I pushed the door open, gun drawn. The living room was a mess. Broken glass, overturned furniture, and in the middle of it all, Mrs. Miller cowering on the floor, her face swollen and bloody. Old man Miller stood over her, a bottle still in his hand, his eyes wild. "Deputy," he slurred, "this ain't none of your business." I kept my voice steady. "Stand down, Miller. Now." He took a swing at me. I dodged, but not fast enough. His fist grazed my jaw. I hit the floor hard, but I was back up in a second, my weapon trained on him. "Last chance," I said. He lunged. I fired. The shot echoed through the house. Miller dropped like a sack of potatoes. I holstered my weapon, heart pounding, and knelt beside Mrs. Miller. "You're safe now," I told her, though I knew from experience that words like that don't always hold much weight. Some scars don't show. As I called for backup, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. BOT. The night was quiet when the call came in. A missing person report. Young woman, last seen at the diner downtown. Routine, I thought. Kids run off, lovers tiffs, that sort of thing. But something in the dispatcher's voice made me sit up straighter. She'd mentioned the diner. My diner. The one where I'd had coffee just hours before. Where I'd seen her. Lena, her name was, sitting alone, looking like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. I pulled up to the scene, the diner's neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old coffee and grease. The owner, a grizzled old guy named Hank, was wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "You find anything unusual, Hank?" I asked, my eyes scanning the booths, the counter, the back door still swinging slightly in the breeze. "Not a thing, deputy," he said, but his hands were shaking. "Just her purse on the seat. Like she up and left it." I picked up the purse, feeling the cold leather against my fingers. Inside, her wallet, her keys, her phone, still on, the screen cracked. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the plate beside it, the fries cold. That's when I noticed the back door. The lock had been jimmied. Not broken, but forced. Someone had been in a hurry. I stepped outside, the night air biting at my face. The parking lot was empty, the gravel crunching under my boots. Then I saw it, a single, fresh tire track cutting through the dirt, leading toward the woods. I knew then. This wasn't routine. This was something else entirely. BOS. Greater than I remember the call like it was yesterday. Domestic disturbance, possible violence. When we rolled up to that trailer park, the air was thick with the stench of spilled liquor and desperation. The place looked like a bomb had hit it. Broken bottles, torn screens, the kind of place where hope went to die. I holstered my gun, but kept my hand close to it. You never know what you're walking into in places like this. The victim's trailer was at the end of the row, half sunk into the dirt like it was ashamed to be there. The door was splintered, hanging off its hinges. Inside, it was dark as a tomb, the only light coming from a flickering bulb that cast long, jagged shadows. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and blood. I could hear the guy inside, raging like a cornered animal. I stepped in slow, my boots crunching on broken glass. The guy was a mountain of a man, wild-eyed, his hands covered in what looked like his own blood. He was standing over a woman curled up on the floor, whimpering. I could see the fear in her eyes, the way she flinched every time he moved. My gut twisted. I'd seen this before. Too many times. "Sir, step back," I said, my voice steady. "Step away from the lady." He turned to me, his face twisted in rage. For a second, I thought he might charge. But then he saw my badge, my hand on my weapon, and something in him deflated. He raised his hands, slow, like a man surrendering to the inevitable. That's when I saw the knife on the floor, glinting in the dim light. I exhaled. Another night in the underworld. Another soul saved, another one lost. You never get used to it, but you do get used to the weight of it. The weight of knowing that for some people, this is just another Tuesday. I cuffed him, read him his rights. The woman finally looked up at me, her eyes full of gratitude, full of pain. I nodded, told her it was over. But I knew better. For her, it had just begun. /S/S/S/S. The air in the interrogation room was thick with tension, the kind that makes the back of your neck itch. I'd been in here with Jason Klein for hours, watching him shift in his seat, his smug smile never fading. He thought he was clever, thought he'd outplayed us. But I'd seen this before. Klein was a con man, smooth-talking and quick with a lie. He'd been arrested for fraud, but the way he kept glancing at the two-way mirror told me he expected someone to swoop in and save him. I let him talk, nodding like I was impressed, while my mind pieced together the cracks in his story. Then the door opened. A suited man, some hotshot lawyer from one of those downtown firms, swept in, briefcase in hand. "Deputy," he said, all condescension. "I believe you've been misinformed about my client's rights." Klein's grin widened. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepling. "No, sir. I believe I've been informed just fine." The lawyer's eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the mirror. That was all I needed. I stood, slow, deliberate. "You know, Mr. Klein, it's funny. Your partner in the next room over? The one who's been sweating through his shirt for the last hour? He didn't seem to think you two were on the same page." The lawyer's hand twitched. Klein's smile slipped. I pulled a file from my desk, let it drop with a thud. "See, here's the thing. You both thought you were so smart, but you forgot one rule. Deceit leaves traces. And I'm real good at following traces." The lawyer paled. Klein's fingers drummed the table. Too fast, too nervous. I smirked. "Game's over, gentlemen." The two-way mirror slid open, and my partner walked in, cuffs at the ready. Klein's panicked eyes met mine as we led them out. Another night, another web unraveled. The rain hadn't let up all night, drumming against the cruiser's roof like a persistent heartbeat. I sat in the parking lot of the old gas station, watching the neon flicker of the open sign through the downpour. The case had been cold for months. Local kid vanished without a trace. No leads, no witnesses. Just a soggy sweatshirt found near the highway. Now, a tip had finally come in. A guy down at the diner, acting nervous, asking about the investigation. I stepped inside, the bell jingling weakly. The air was thick with the smell of grease and coffee. The man at the counter, a wiry type with a twitch, looked up, eyes darting. I took the stool next to him, let the silence stretch. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, spilling some onto the formica. "I hear you've been asking questions," I said, keeping my voice low. "About the missing boy." His fingers stilled. "Just curious," he muttered. But his pulse was visible in his neck, a quick, frantic rhythm. I leaned in slightly. "Curious enough to know the kid's name?" "The places he hung out." A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Then, without warning, he bolted. The stool clattered, and he was out the door before I could react. I was after him in an instant, my boots splashing through puddles as he veered into the alley. He was fast, but the rain worked in my favor. His sneakers slid on the slick pavement. I tackled him, pinning him down. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Talk to me," I said, gripping his arm. "Now." And that's when he did. The words spilled out between sobs. How he'd been there that night, seen something, but was too scared to come forward. The name of the kid's friend, the one who'd been acting strange. The truth, finally, after all this time. The rain kept falling. But inside, something else had stopped. My heart, for just a second. Because this was it. The break we'd needed. S/INST. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like a second layer. I stood outside the courthouse, watching the crowd. Faces I'd seen before, some familiar, some not. The defendant, a man in his 40s with hollow eyes and a swollen jaw, was being led inside. He'd been caught red-handed, but the real story was in the murmurs of the people around me. I saw the mother of the victim, her grip tightening on her son's hand. The son, just a boy, looked up at me with eyes that held too much sorrow for his age. I nodded at them, a silent acknowledgement. The crowd was a mix of anger and relief, but beneath it all, there was something else, fear. Fear of each other, fear of the system, fear of the cycle that never seemed to break. As the gavel came down, sealing the verdict, I felt the tension in the air shift. The defendant's family sat in the back, their faces a mask of defiance. One woman spat on the ground as the bailiffs led him away. I didn't react. I'd seen it all before. Justice was served, but it didn't feel like enough. Outside, the reporters swarmed, their questions